Good afternoon, good morning. In India, the time is 3:45 a.m. So thank you very much for giving me the chance to present my work here. I have some throat problem, so might be my voice will be less. Yeah. So my title for today's talk is Incorporating Behavioral Economics into Demand Response Program for Grid Security. Because nowadays everyone's shifting towards from conventional grid to more renewable grid. So there is need to incorporate important parameter of behavioral of individual consumers. So the agenda I'm covering in this presentation: introduction, limitation of conventional DR programs, research gaps, behavioral economics, proposed behavioral DR framework modeling, some results I'm proposing, and some policy implications way forward. Conclusions. So first, I want to state here that why demand response matters. Because this is the first line of flexibility, resource of modern grids. Because it can be critical during peak demand events, renewable intermittency. It took place over a period. Extreme weather and contingency occurs in the system. Increasing reliance on inverter-based dominant consumer-driven systems, because in India and across the world we are seeing more and more solar, more and more wind, more and more storage facilities also. So they are mostly dominated through the inverters. So the point comes that how to respond in that conditions. So the limitations of conventional DR programs we are going with, that time of use tariff, dynamic pricing, automated control. The challenges are low enrollment, because for these particular thing, there are several barriers also took place. Some political barriers, some economic barriers, some technical barriers are happen. So we could not enroll all the customers available to participate in the grid operation. Participation fatigue, rebound effects. So typically, I would say that human behavior treated as rational and uniform, it is unrealistic. We need to make a proper policy, proper mechanism to incorporate individuals to be a part of supply systems or energy system operations. These are some research gap. Existing DR model focus on price elasticity, neglect of cognitive biases. The missing integration link is that psychological decision drivers. There is no mechanism which map the expectations of the individual participants. Social influence mechanisms, behavioral heterogeneity. So these are the missing link. These are the most important parameter, because energy is being used by the consumers. Okay, supply, whatever generation distribution took place by the utilities. So there is need to bridge the gap took place. So the main question for moving forward is that, can behavioral science significantly enhance DR effectiveness and grid security? So we need to find out how this can be an integral part of it. So here you can see some behavioral economics like loss aversion, default bias, social norming, bound rationality. So in that case, we need to give attention to each and everything to make them the part of it. Right? Loss aversion consumer respond more strongly to perceived losses than equivalent gains. Default bias preference for pre-selected options. like social norming, peer comparison influences action, bounded rationality, limited attention, information processing. Ultimately, in the present existing system, there is not much communication infrastructure is there. Okay. Electrical infrastructure is okay, but there is need to communicate. Only smart meter took place um, very recently, but not much active participation from the consumer side happening. So here you can see this is the simple block diagram that energy management system monitors grid conditions to detect peak demand or security risk. A behavioral demand response engine generates price plus behavior signals. Consumers adjust loads via advanced metering infrastructure, IoT-based DR signals, feedback update system parameter to improve future demand response performances. Behavior rate intervention in demand response design. There are three layers. One is the technical layer, second one is the economic layer, and third layer is behavioral layer. So there is need to integrate these three. Without that, the the things will not happen because in technical layer, main key line is advanced metering infrastructure, controllable loads, automation. That is happening. Economic layer, rebates, time of use tariff, CPP. So these also are driving parameter. But next thing is the most important. Rebate rate flexibilities, loss framed incentives, real-time salience feedback, personalized social norms, loss framed incentives, default enrollment opt-out. This is the very important term, default enrollment, because every customer must be registered or has been enrolled in the demand response program. If that customer is not interested, he can opt out. But by default, he will be a part of it. So this is the proposed integrated framework in which three layers has been proposed. First one, the behavior, second, the technology, and third is the control algorithms. So this may include flexible generation and load, behavioral demand response layer, energy management system driven dispatch logic, grid security objectives. So there is shift from conventional DR to behavioral DR also. So we need to understand that this will be additional feature that will be enriching the grid operation in the changed scenario. This modeling approach we have considered. One is the agent-based modeling and second one is the survey-based modeling. So in this case, there is three parameters. These are risk preference, responsiveness to incentives, social sensitivity. So agent-based modeling for the consumer representation will enhance the technological capability of the proposed grid infrastructure that will be embedded at the feeder level as well. It will not be at the centralized level. I would say at centralized level, the grid is more smart. There is no problem at all. The response time is in 5 to 7 cycles only. But the problem arises in the distribution networks at the downstream. So there is need to empower the feeder level supply distributions. So the each agent will be given preference like risk sensitivity, responsiveness to incentives, social influence factors, load flexibility ranges. So this is the one approach in which every customer will be considered as an agent. Then he need to respond as per the priorities and the agent will be able to take decisions autonomously. So based on the artificial intelligence and reinforcement learning technologies. Second approach is the survey-driven parameters. So behavioral parameters are calibrated using survey data, capturing preferences, attentional limits, and response tendencies. This ensures realistic behavioral diversity rather than assuming homogeneous consumer responses. So, what survey parameter we consider that calibrated behavioral coefficients, and it helps to segment consumer classes. It may be based on energy consumption, maybe type of customers like domestic, for commercial, for industrial, or maybe using for EV charging or storage facilities. So these parameters include as like loss sensitivity index, default adherence probability, social influence weights. So these are the parameters ensures realism beyond purely theoretical assumptions because survey given the exact picture and theoretically we assume we generally work on the synthetic data. So in that case, we conducted a survey in the local areas where my research scholars reside. They cover 500 houses and to find out the energy consumption parameter and their willingness to be a part of demand response program. So this was the simulation scenarios. I considered baseline demand response in which price signal only were there, that based on the time of use tariff, that at what time energy cost will be less, at what time energy cost will be higher. So this was the first parameter. Second parameter, behavioral demand response, in which economics integrated signals. So in this case, the consumer need to respond based on the price signal, based on the time of use tariff, based on his behavior. Because sometimes, because of smart grading functionalities in demand response program, when generation is less, demand is more. So the cost of electricity becomes high. So in that case, consumer is not interested to shut down their loads, but they are forced to shut down or reduce the demand. In that case, consumer behavior comes that the things might be more important than shut down, so he may not be a part of demand response programs all the times. It depends upon the requirement and needs. So in that case, what a person thinks about that particular scenario, he will respond about it. Third approach is the hybrid demand response. That is the part of behavioral plus automated control. So the metrics for all these considered participation rates, peak load reduction, and grid stress elevation. So in that case, participation rate, ultimately most of the people depend who are participating, responding based on their economic conditions. Those people are not having sufficient economic uh, wealth with them. The participation rate is higher. The wealthy people are not participating well into this demand response program. The peak load reduction is the basically second stage of it because some people are participating, some are not. So it helping to reduce the demand or to shift the demand from the peak load period to some other period, or I may say off load peak periods. This helping grid stress elevation because in some cases, then like one realistic case study I am sharing here, that in some area there are a lot of electric vehicles penetration took place. During the evening time, most of the people put their vehicle for charging This creates a overloading in that particular region. This is the one kind of ice landing took place in that area. Results overloading of energy infrastructure. So you can see this was the typical participation rate. Baseline 18%, opt out only 56%. Loss frame plus opt out 68%, and with full package, maximum 72% was the participation rate. Because some candidates was giving the incentives, some has given additional benefit of like penalty or not using electricity at that particular time. They may given some incentive for using the electricity at some other time when demand is not peak. This is the impact on grid performance security observed. Behavioral demand response leads to 20% higher peak load reduction compared to price only DR, improved responsiveness during critical peak and contingency events. This also helping to reduce the ramping stress. It helps to reduce ramping stress because this has been forecasted by the year 2030. The ramping rate in 3 hours would be 48,000 megawatt. So, because of generation from solar, wind, more typically 50% participation took place in Indian grid from these sources. So the ramp rate again creating a problem. Sometimes there is weather problem, sometimes there may be generation is less, demand is more, and these kind of things may happen. So the ramp rate in generation or maybe in the consumption will be much higher from the previous ones. So how the things responds in this particular things for grid security. So grid conditions are moderate continuously to detect peak demand or security risk when triggered. A demand response event sends price behavioral signal to selected consumers. Those are participating. Consumers adjust loads based on behavioral factor, loss aversion, default norms, etc. Aggregated load response is evaluated against grid security limits. Results are recorded to refine future demand response strategy or trigger supplementary actions. So this is the most important thing that we need to keep the grid security in the center and other things need to act to maintain the grid reliability. So contribution to energy resilience and security. There are four stages of it. One is the strengthen operational resilience of distribution and microgrid systems, enhances self-balancing capability of demand-side resources. Third one is the reduced reliance on fossil fuel-based peaking plants. And fourth is the most important, improve recovery during extreme event, heat waves, storms. Okay. In the coastal line areas, this kind of incident took place many times. In desert areas, heat waves took place. In that case, temperature is too high. In one solar park, I have visited for some technical consultancy work. I saw the temperature was about 56, 57 degrees Celsius. So solar panel surface becomes non-uniform. So the electricity generation from that plant reduced to just only 50 to 55% only during the peak summer season. So again, the weather conditions, climatic things affects the electricity generation both from the solar and wind. This is the technical research direction for future technical advancements that like AI-based energy management system along with agentic systems and survey-based systems because AI can respond better in such scenarios. Second point is predictive load and behavior forecasting. It will schedule the behavior of storage devices, battery energy storage systems to respond when to store, when to supply electricity, and even more, one step we can move forward. We can ask EV owners to participate in the grid operation. They may pump power into the grid when the vehicle is not running, because the survey says that about more than 90% of time vehicles are available in the parking. So we may use them for storage or supplying power into the grid when required. So I say them virtual power plants. So coupling behavior with demand response will be distributed energy resources and battery energy storage systems. So real-time behavioral adaptation using feedback loops, it need to work repeatedly all the times, because sometimes consumers behavior different, and sometimes consumer behavior will be different. So there is no restriction to be imposed on the customers. They need to incorporate it into the system operation. We cannot create the constraints for that, but we need to accommodate their behavior in the responding towards the demand response programs. Second point is most important, that the things need to be incorporated in the policy, planning, and after deployment. So there are implementation pathways. That regulatory framework must be happen for enrollment of the consumers. There must be a default enrollment. There must be some um, basically the procedural enrollment. Nowadays, in our country, what happening? The consumer need to showcase their interest to participate in the grid. To participate, like if some customer having solar photovoltaic system installed at their premises, he has to report the utility. Then after only utility will install net energy meters so that the metering can be done. It should be happen freely by default. And why the regulatory things comes in between? So this is the regulatory support is required. Second point, the behavioral incentive design. If some customers are responding by choice in the grid operation, so he must get some incentives. He might get some carbon credits, he might get some financial incentives, or they might get some preference over other customers. This should be a policy. Utility level capacity building behavioral program design. Third point is most important, that urban distribution feeders pilots should be tested. Community microgrids are very less, but they are responding well. They are working in the isolated mode. They are not injecting power into grid because they are having their own storage capacities. They store the surplus power and they are using that power when required. And this particularly happens in renewable dominant region. There are certain areas where wind potential is there, solar potential is there. Some cases are there where biomass is there, agri waste is there. So their areas has been classified as a clusters across the country. Like one region having lot of potential for mini and micro hydro plants. They are also allowing into the grid operation because the capacity, lowest capacity they permitting of 1 kW. So this is the conclusion, that traditional demand response model underestimate the human behavior. Behavioral economics significantly enhances the participant rates of the consumers, load shifting effectiveness, besides forcing them to shift grid reliability. When customer participation will be there, the limitation will be that responding from the grid side, how they will respond. But now it is technological inclusion is changing the scenario very hard. So the grade reliability will be one parameter and will be there. So human-centric demand response is essential for future smart grids. I am working on it. I have developed a test bench in my university, which focusing on human-centric behavioral demand response program in our university. So thank you very much for giving me the chance, Otago University and Atria University also for permitting me to present this work in this great symposium. Thank you very much for the organizers to consider me for this presentation. Thank you very much.